My name is Grace Whitford. I am 66 years old, a retired fundraiser who once spent decades helping wealthy families turn their success into scholarships and libraries. People used to tell me I had a gift for seeing potential in others. I never imagined the day would come when I would struggle to see it in my own son. It began with a phone call I thought would be joyful. I stood in my kitchen, morning sunlight stretching long across the wood floor, the brass key to my estate resting under my palm. I called Lucas to ask about the wedding date. I still kept the shoes I planned to wear, navy blue with a little sparkle. Robert, my husband, would have teased that I was trying to steal the show. Lucas answered. His voice was too careful. Mom, about the wedding. I waited for him to finish, smiling before I had a reason to. Madeline's voice suddenly slipped in, smooth and polished. We already had it, Grace. It was very small. Family only. Family only. The words hit harder than if she had shouted. I looked over at the dining table. 2 empty chairs sat across from me. One used to be Robert's. The other belonged to Lucas whenever he visited. They felt like ghosts now. I tried to steady my breath. I'm not family? Oh, it was just immediate, Madeline added quickly. You know how it is, intimate, romantic. A tiny laugh from her, a dead silence from me. That was the moment I realized the air in the room had grown cold. My hand tightened around the edge of the table, knuckles pale. Lucas said nothing. I listened to the static on the line, hoping he would break it. He didn't. Before I could respond, she continued, her tone taking on the peculiar brightness of someone who thinks they are doing you a favor. Anyway, we'll swing by this week. We need to talk about the house. My house. The $6 million estate Robert and I built on the Santa Barbara coast. The place we poured every dream and saved dollar into. The place where we planted citrus trees on our first anniversary and rescued an old horse barn together. The place Lucas learned to walk, then run, then leave. What about the house? I asked quietly. There was a pause, like she was deciding how blunt to be. Since Lucas is the only heir and we're starting our life as a married couple, we're moving in. My pulse stumbled. You're moving into my home? It just makes sense. We don't want you to worry about maintenance or loneliness. You can take the guest cottage, of course. Another too sweet hum. We'll make it comfortable for you. Comfortable, like placing an old woman in storage. I turned my face toward the window. Sea wind pushed against the glass like it wanted in. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. This estate isn't yours. Madeline inhaled sharply. Well, Lucas and I have discussed everything. It's the natural transition. Madeline, I said calmly, have you heard about the will? There was another beat of silence. A long one. I'm not sure what you're implying. I suppose, I said. We'll talk about it when you arrive. I hung up first. For a moment I stood there, staring at my reflection in the black screen of the phone. Not seeing my face, just a blurred outline and a pair of trembling fingers. If you are listening to this story, I want you to stay with me. Because when someone tells a mother she is not part of her own family, that is where a different story begins. A story not about revenge, but about dignity. And maybe someone watching has been pushed aside or treated as a burden. Maybe you need to be reminded of something. Your worth does not shrink just because someone else decides you take up too much space. The phone buzzed again. A message from Lucas. Mom, we love you. It was just small. Don't take it personally. I stared at those words until they blurred. Love should never arrive with instructions for how to feel. I walked to the dining table and touched the backs of the 2 empty chairs. Robert had always sat closest to the window. I slid my fingers across the wood grain. A memory rose. sharp and warm. Our second year here. He had just installed a new front gate. We stood by the porch, hands dirty, sunburn on our necks. He pressed a brass key into my palm and said, "We don't own this place, Grace. We take care of it. Stewardship first." His thumb brushed the key. "One day, when we're gone, someone worthy will take care of it too." I swallowed the ache building in my chest. Madeline didn't understand stewardship. She understood ownership and appearances and the kind of wealth that sparkles in photos. 3 days after the call, the doorbell rang. The echo bounced through the house, confident and entitled. I opened the door to see moving boxes stacked on the porch. Lucas stood awkwardly behind them. Madeline smiled like a realtor sealing a deal. "We're moving into your $6 million estate," she announced, as if reading a headline she wrote herself. My fingers brushed the brass key in my pocket. I felt its teeth press into my skin, a reminder of Robert's voice and every quiet sacrifice we made to protect this land. I smiled back at her, calm as a stone beneath waves. "It's not mine anymore." Her smile froze. The first crack in her certainty. I remained steady, waiting for what would come next. Madeline blinked at me, trying to understand what I had just said. Lucas looked from her to me, confusion tightening his brow. The boxes sat like squat little soldiers between us, a line drawn without chalk. "What do you mean it's not yours anymore?" Madeline asked, her voice scraping away the polite coating she always kept on. I didn't rush to answer. I let the ocean breeze carry a few heartbeats away, rustling the rosemary bushes near the porch. My hand stayed in my pocket, fingers resting on the brass key, grounding. I said simply, "You should have asked before assuming anything." Madeline's jaw locked. "We are family." 3 days ago, I wasn't, I replied. Lucas stepped forward then, shoulders rounded, eyes pleading. "Mom, please, let's not start like this. We're here now. We want this to work." He said it like a peace offering, but the cardboard walls surrounding him said otherwise. I scanned the driveway. The trunk of their SUV was still open, more boxes visible, designer luggage, framed prints, wine crates. A moving truck idled behind it, rumbling like an impatient stomach. "You didn't pack for a visit," I said. Madeline folded her arms. "We made a decision as a married couple. Space is tight in our apartment. It's safer for you to have us here. For your health." That last phrase was a dagger wrapped in silk. My health is perfectly fine. She tilted her head, giving me that medical concern expression people wear when they want something. "We've heard differently." From who? I already knew the answer. She liked to plant whispers like seeds, then act surprised when the rumors sprouted exactly as she intended. I slowly stepped outside and shut the door behind me, placing myself between them and the threshold. "This estate is not an extra bedroom you get to claim," I told her. "It is my home, my memories, my life's work with Robert." Madeline's patience cracked. "Robert is gone, and you're alone out here with all this space. We can help you take care of it." "I've been taking care of it." She reached for the doorknob. My hand shot out faster, palm slamming against it. Our eyes locked. No more smiling. Lucas rubbed his neck, eyes drifting to the gravel. "Mom, we just thought..." But he didn't finish. Because he didn't know what he thought. He had handed over his thinking to his wife a long time ago. I remembered when Lucas was small, how he used to race through these halls barefoot, carrying toy horses and shouting that he would ride real ones someday. He called this place magical. Now he saw it as a property line and a financial future. I closed my eyes for a moment to steady my heart. When I opened them, Madeline was already pulling her phone from her purse. "We can do this the easy way," she murmured, or the legal way? My pulse cooled. A strange calm took over. Legal way, I repeated softly, letting the words settle between us. If you prefer that approach, you should know something first. Lucas's eyes flicked up. Madeline's thumb paused above the screen. Robert didn't leave this estate to you outright, I said. There are complexities. Madeline narrowed her gaze. What complexities? You'll find out soon enough. It wasn't a threat. It was a door she hadn't noticed, now locked tight. She lowered the phone. For the first time, uncertainty splintered her expression. Look, Lucas tried again. Can we just come in and talk? Please? Mom? His voice. It was so close to the sweet boy who used to come home with pockets full of seashells for me. It almost worked. Almost. But love without respect is just leverage. No, I said. Not today. I stepped aside just enough to make my refusal unmistakable. The door behind me stayed sealed. Jonah, my farmhand, walked up from the stables, wiping dust from his palms. He spotted the scene unfolding and slowed his steps. Beatrice, my longtime neighbor, had been watering her azaleas next door. Her gaze drifted over, concerned. Of course they would see. Madeline wanted an audience. She always did. You're making this more dramatic than it has to be, Madeline hissed, lowering her voice as if worried about appearances. Drama is showing up with a moving truck to a house you don't own, I answered. Lucas winced. Madeline tried again, plastering her bright, social face back on. We'll just bring the boxes in and sort this out. We've already told everyone we're living here. My parents are stopping by this weekend to celebrate. It'll be embarrassing to change plans. I raised one eyebrow. Embarrassment isn't fatal. Lucas looked like he might cry. Madeline looked like she might bite. I drew a breath deep enough to fill my ribs. You both should leave. Madeline scoffed. We're not going anywhere. The wind picked up, sweeping hair across my cheek. A mourning dove cooed from the barn roof, oblivious to the small war taking shape. You heard your mother, Beatrice called from her yard, arms crossed, chin high. Leave. Madeline shot her a glare sharp enough to slice paper. This isn't your business. Beatrice didn't blink. Oh, honey, in a town this size, everything is everyone's business. Jonah arrived beside me, a quiet force of support. He didn't say a word, but his stance alone made my knees stronger. Madeline's smile returned, tight and toothless. We'll be back, soon, and next time we won't be asking to come in. As they turned toward their SUV, I kept my hand on the key. The metal warmed under my fingers, as if Robert's palm were still over mine. Lucas hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps. He stared up at me, guilt flooding his features. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I'm sorry, Mom. They drove away, gravel spitting up behind them. I waited until the sound faded before I let my shoulders drop. The house behind me felt larger than ever and emptier, but I inhaled the ocean air and let the breeze fill the hollow places. They thought I was weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I walked back inside and leaned against the door, listening as the final traces of their engine faded into the distance. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the quiet before something breaks. My fingers slid into my pocket, again, curling around the brass key. Its edges pressed gently against my skin, steadying me. I crossed the dining room, the two empty chairs still waiting. I set the key beside my teacup and stared out toward the sea. The morning fog had begun to lift, revealing the soft shimmer of the Pacific. The horizon always looked slightly blurred at this hour, as if possibilities were stretching themselves awake. Robert and I used to watch this view at dawn. He would come in from the barn smelling of hay and salt water, his boots leaving little trails of dust on the tiles. He didn't talk much in the mornings, but some silences are warm. We built a life of those moments. I closed my eyes and let one of those memories surface, just for a breath. Flash. Robert's hands gripping a fence post while I held the level straight. Flash. The sound of nails being driven into fresh wood. Flash. Horses whinnying as they explored their new stalls. Flash. A foggy morning when he placed the key in my hand and said, "We protect this land. Stewardship first." He always spoke as though he was preserving something fragile. Hope, heritage, a promise that the world still had places worth caring for. I opened my eyes sharply. The house felt too big and too quiet without him here. But grief had no space to spread today. I needed resolve more than memories. I poured myself a glass of water, the sound crisp in the hush. When I raised it to my lips, my hand tremored, not from fear, but from the adrenaline refusing to leave my veins. "Inhale," I whispered. My breath steadied. Exhale. The ground beneath me felt solid again. On the wall near the hallway hung the framed wedding photo of Robert and me. He was 29, eyes bright beneath that ridiculous cowboy hat he insisted on wearing. I looked open-hearted, fearless, trusting. That woman didn't imagine betrayal could come from the same body she once held as a baby. I reached out and straightened the frame. Just a slight tilt, but it mattered. Order mattered. Control mattered. I wasn't giving either away. The brass key glinted from the table, catching sunlight as if calling to me. I picked it up and rubbed the grooves with my thumb. I remembered the tap of metal against Robert's ring every time he unlocked the gate, a small music of belonging. Outside, the ocean wind grew stronger. Curtains fluttered like breath. I stepped out to the porch and closed my eyes. The scent of citrus blossoms and sea spray wrapped around me. The surf crashed gently against the shore cliffs, rhythmic, patient. Nature always moved with purpose, never rushed, never manipulated. I nodded to myself. I haven't let go. The words weren't loud, but they rang true in my bones. A soft sound behind me made me turn. Jonah stood near the garden path, his hat in his hands. He must have come back after seeing the standoff earlier, unsure whether to check on me or give me space. "You okay, Ms. Whitford?" he asked, carefully. I nodded once. "They think they can just take everything." He looked down. "I know. Folks talk." I sighed. "I'm sure they do." Jonah shuffled a bit, then met my gaze. "Robert trusted you with this place for a reason." The lump that had formed in my throat threatened to rise again. I swallowed it down. "Thank you, Jonah," I said. I needed to hear that. He gave a small nod, then returned to the barn, leaving me with the sea and the wind and the weight of expectation only I could carry. I walked down to the front gate, gravel crunching beneath each step. The latch was old and rusted at the corners, but strong. I slipped the key into the lock, turned it, and listened to the familiar click. The sound of a boundary reinforcing itself. With the gate locked, I pressed my hand flat against the cool metal. A silent vow. Robert's vow. My vow now. My phone buzzed in my pocket, sharp and intrusive. I pulled it out. A new message from Madeline. "We'll be back tonight. Have the keys ready." I let the message sit there on the screen, cold, demanding, certain of victory. My lips curved into something halfway between a smirk and a prayer. "Keys," I repeated softly. She didn't know what she was really asking for. Control, history, a legacy she hadn't earned and didn't respect. The brass key warmed in my palm again, as if the metal remembered better than she did. I turned back toward the house. Shadows were shifting inside, long, tall, stretching across the old hardwood as the day changed direction. I was changing too. I paused at the door, taking one last look at the ocean, endless and unconquered. Stewardship first. The phrase echoed like a heartbeat. I slipped the key into my pocket and stepped inside, shutting the door with a quiet click. They thought I would roll over. They thought I was weak. They thought the story was theirs now. They had no idea what was coming. The day didn't wait for me to gather strength. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in off the water, gray and thick, casting a winter hush over the estate, even though the calendar hadn't agreed to winter yet. I moved from room to room, turning on a few lamps, not because I feared the dark, but because the house deserved warmth. Jonah checked the horses, fed the chickens, and fixed a loose hinge on the barn door. I watched him through the kitchen window, grateful for his quiet loyalty. He never asked for anything except clear direction. I promised myself I would protect his job as fiercely as the land itself. My solitude was broken by the crunch of gravel under tires. The sound was too confident to be a visitor and too familiar to be anyone else. I stepped onto the porch just as Lucas and Madeline's SUV rolled up again, this time without hesitation, without boxes. They had come for a confrontation. The sky braced itself, wind carrying the threat of rain. Before they even reached the steps, Madeline raised her phone like a shield. "We spoke to an attorney," she announced, "and we know you don't have the right to keep us out." I stood tall, both feet planted, hand resting casually in my pocket where the key sat cool and ready. "Your attorney must be very optimistic." Lucas looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept since the morning confrontation. His eyes darted between us, searching for a way to dissolve the tension and failing. "Let's just go inside," he said weakly. "We're family." My heart squeezed at the word, not because it had power, but because it used to. Madeline didn't wait for permission. She marched toward the door as if she owned the foundation it stood on. She grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. She yanked harder, rattling the wood. "It's locked," she spat. "Of course it is," I replied. "Most people lock their homes." She pressed a hand to her forehead, forcing a smile that no longer masked her irritation. "Grace, you're making everything so dramatic." I tilted my head, studying her. "Is that what I'm doing?" Her eyes flickered with a shadow of uncertainty. She lifted the phone again. "My parents will be here in 3 days to celebrate us moving in. You are embarrassing us before we even begin." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. Lucas closed his eyes as though bracing for impact. "Mom, please, don't do this." I stepped closer to him, close enough that I could smell the faint cologne I used to buy him on Christmas, close enough to see the fear behind his frustration. "I am not the one doing this," I whispered. Madeline scoffed, rolling her eyes so dramatically it almost looked painful. "Enough. Step aside." She reached for the door again, and that was the moment Jonah rounded the corner from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He slowed when he saw us, reading the situation instantly. He slipped the rag into his back pocket and moved closer, not threatening, just present. A grounded reminder that I was not alone. Madeline's shoulders tensed. "This is between us." Jonah remained silent, a statue of calm. Footsteps echoed from the walkway behind the fence. Beatrice Miles, her cardigan fluttering in the breeze, stepped through the gate she must have left unlocked earlier in the day. Her gaze sharpened as she took in the scene. She came to stand at the foot of my porch stairs, like a watchful angel who didn't mind brandishing judgment as a sword. "You two again," she said, voice flat as concrete. "We're handling a family matter," Madeline snapped. Beatrice gave a soft laugh. "Really? Because from here it looks like you're invading a home." Madeline's eyes narrowed. "Grace invited you to weigh in?" "No," Beatrice replied, folding her arms. But I'll always show up when someone tries to bully a good woman. Madeline's mask thinned further, her breathing tight. She spun toward Lucas, voice pitched high enough to crack. Are you going to let them talk to me like this? Lucas looked down, voice barely audible. I didn't ask them to talk. The wind pushed harder, whipping hair into my face, slapping leaves against the roof. I felt the storm shift from weather to something personal. Leave, I said. Now. Madeline straightened her back, stepping forward slowly, like a predator refusing to retreat. You think you have power here because you have a key and a gate? This property is part of our future. Lucas is your only child. It will all be his anyway. I breathed deeply, allowing the ocean air to pull steel into my spine. You don't get to decide my future for me, I told her, and you don't get to erase me from my own life. I reached into my pocket and brought the brass key up to eye level between us. It gleamed even under thickening clouds. Lucas stared at it, as if remembering something he'd forgotten long ago. Madeline stared too, but only with greed. This key opens more than a door, I said quietly. It carries every sacrifice Robert and I made. Late nights, early mornings, payroll for staff we treated as family. The day we almost gave up and then didn't. It's not just metal, it's memory and love and labor. Madeline scoffed. It's property. Stop romanticizing a deed. Beatrice stepped forward one pace, eyes blazing. Wow, you really say whatever comes into your head, don't you? Jonah chuckled under his breath, barely audible. Madeline whirled. Call the sheriff, she barked at Lucas. We have rights. Lucas stared at her as though seeing the edge of a cliff beneath her feet. Madeline. She turned the full force of her panic on him. Do it! His breathing quickened. His hands trembled. He reached for his phone but didn't unlock it. I can't, he whispered. Her shock was instant and uncontrolled. Excuse me? Lucas swallowed hard. Not like this. The wind stilled for half a second, as if the entire coastline waited to hear her reaction. Madeline's laugh sounded like glass splitting under pressure. Unbelievable. She stepped back, eyes burning holes into me. This isn't over, she vowed. No, I said softly. It's just beginning. She spun on her heel and stalked back to the SUV. Lucas followed, slower, shoulders bowed as though something heavy had finally landed on him. They drove off with a scream of tires against wet gravel. Beatrice released a long breath. You all right? I nodded, though my lungs still felt tight. Thank you for stepping in. She placed a warm hand on my arm. Hope is what he keeps stealing from you. Don't let him. Her words sank deep, deeper than she knew. Jonah walked up beside me. We've got your back, he said. The storm clouds overhead cracked with the first sign of rain. I closed my fist around the brass key and stepped inside, locking the door once more. Strength wasn't loud. It was a latch clicked shut. Rain continued through the night and into the morning. When I woke, the house felt wrapped in a gray hush, as though even the walls were listening for what might happen next. I slipped on my robe and padded toward the kitchen, the soft thud of each step echoing more loudly than it should have. 2 mugs sat drying on the rack. One for me, one that used to be for Robert. I chose his today. A reminder that I wasn't alone, not really. Steam curled up from the tea as I sat at the dining table. Those 2 empty chairs stared at me again. I stared right back. I pulled my checkbook from the drawer. I flipped through the last few months of stubs, transfers, gifts, coverage of debts Lucas promised to repay. In 3 years, $96,200 had left this checkbook and landed in his life like it was owed to him. I felt something inside me stiffen. The doorbell rang once, gently. I glanced up. Through the window's rain-streaked glass, I saw Beatrice holding a basket covered with a cloth. She nodded toward the porch, as if granting me permission to take my time before answering. I opened the door, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls greeted me before she did. "Didn't want you sitting in that house with nothing warm," she said. I almost smiled. "You know me too well." We settled at the table. She poured us both coffee. She insisted hers always taste better poured by a friend. We ate in silence for a moment, the cinnamon easing some of the tension in my throat. "You look steadier," she observed, placing her mug down with a soft clink against wood. "I feel steadier," I replied. We sat a moment longer, listening to the rain tapping faint rhythms on the roof. She leaned in. "Grace, do you understand what they're trying to do?" "I do now." "They're greedy," she said. "But that's not the worst of it." I looked up, our eyes locking. "The worst," she continued, "is that they think you won't fight back." Her words landed like a spark in dry grass. I pushed back from the table and went to the hallway closet. At the very top shelf, behind some old linens, sat a small safe box. I brought it to the table and spun the combination dial with fingers that barely trembled anymore. The click of the final turn echoed like a promise. Inside, neatly folded, was the original will, Robert's handwriting on the cover. My heart caught for a beat. "He left everything to Lucas," I said quietly. "He believed in passing down legacy." Beatrice's gaze softened. "Believing in legacy isn't the same as handing it to wolves." The rain outside intensified, slapping the windows with purpose. I studied the familiar signatures, the dotted lines of what once felt like certainty. I ran my thumb over Robert's name, feeling the indentation of his pen strokes. Love and trust lived in those grooves. So, had naivete. "I think it's time," Beatrice said, "for you to talk to someone who can protect your rights, someone who knows how to use the tools they're trying to use against you." I closed the safe with a steady breath. "I agree." "Your lawyer friend," she continued. "Didn't Robert trust someone with all the estate paperwork before he got sick?" "Yes." My pulse quickened with purpose. "Grant Barlow. He's smart. He watched this estate rise from dust. If anyone knows where the loopholes and protections live, it's him." Beatrice smiled, satisfied. I stood and walked to the window. The rain finally began to lighten, thin sunbeams filtering through the clouds. The sea roared in the distance, alive and resolute. "They've been stealing from you for years," Beatrice said behind me. "Not just money. Hope is what he keeps stealing from you." Lucas's words from the phone replayed in my head. "Don't take it personally." But it was personal. It always had been. I turned back to her. "It ends now." Beatrice rose, her voice gentle but certain. "Good, because if you keep giving, they will never stop taking." I nodded. She squeezed my shoulder before leaving with the empty basket. "You deserve peace, Grace. Make them earn every inch of this place if they're going to fight. Every inch." The front door closed behind her. I stood alone for a moment in the quiet, letting her words settle into my bones. Rain dripped steadily off the eaves, soft but relentless. I went to my desk and sat. The chair creaked, familiar and honest. I dialed Grant's number. When he answered, his voice was a calm reminder of better days. "Grace, it's been too long." "Yes," I said, "and I need your help." His tone shifted at once. "Tell me everything." I did. I held nothing back. By the end, he was already forming a plan. He asked for documents, for access to account histories, for every transfer I had ever made to Lucas and Madeline. His questions were precise, his purpose razor sharp. "First step," he said, "is stopping the flow of money. Today." I exhaled. Relief and fear pulsed through me in equal measure. "Do it." "And then?" he asked. I closed my eyes and felt the brass key's weight in my pocket. "Then, we start putting locks on more than doors." After the call, I returned to the porch. The rain clouds had finally cracked open, light spilling through like a new page being written. I lifted my face toward the breeze. The ocean was loud today, like it was cheering me on. No one was going to push me aside again. Not without a fight. I spent the next morning doing something I had never done in 66 years of living. Documenting everything, every minute, every detail. My handwriting marched across the pages of a lined notebook, each line becoming a safeguard. Grant's instructions were clear. Facts first, emotion later. I was good at facts. I had simply forgotten that they could be armor. While my tea cooled beside me, I flipped through old bank statements, circling every check to Lucas and every Venmo transfer to Madeline. I underlined each note I had written in the memo lines. Rent help, emergency bill, just until next paycheck. They were tiny tombstones for disappointments I had buried over time. My phone dinged twice. Alerts from my bank. Transactions blocked. Access paused. Just like that, the open pipe of generosity they had relied on for years had run dry. I placed a hand over my heart. It didn't feel cruel. It felt like oxygen returning. Jonah knocked softly on the doorframe. He wore his work gloves and held a notepad of his own. "I wrote down all the times they came by the last few weeks," he said. "License plate photos, too." He handed the pages over. I thanked him. He nodded once, then went back to repairing a fence post that didn't actually need repairing. Some men build things when they care. It's how they speak. Later that afternoon, Grant drove up the gravel road, his sedan splashing through puddles left by the storm. He stepped out, wearing the same navy blazer I used to tease him about, his briefcase looking heavier than necessary. He shook off the rain from his shoulders and hugged me firmly. "You holding up?" he asked. "I'm awake now," I said. Grant set his briefcase on the kitchen table, opening it like a surgeon preparing for operation. Paper after paper slid out. Forms, copies of deeds, property tax assessments, financial disclosures. He laid everything in careful piles. He glanced around the house, assessing more than the documents. "The structure is solid," he murmured, "not just the wood." Then business began. We sat shoulder to shoulder as he reviewed the old will. His pen tapped slowly on the table. Once, twice. Then he pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at me with an expression halfway between relief and disbelief. "He never dissolved the trust," he said. I blinked. "The trust?" Grant nodded, lips curving into a smile that could cut stone. "Robert set up a living trust years ago for the estate and surrounding land. It overrides the will unless specifically revoked." "And he didn't revoke it?" "No, which means you are not the sole decision-maker in theory." His voice trailed off as he reached for another folder. But Robert did something rare and brilliant. He appointed independent trustees. My breath caught. Meaning? Meaning Lucas cannot just step in and claim anything. This estate is protected by conditions Robert set. Stewardship clauses, conservation clauses. Very strict. He tapped his finger on one paragraph. "This land cannot be sold without fulfilling certain obligations. Someone would need proof of your inability to manage it before any takeover." I understood. Madeline's strategy. The rumors. The slanted looks. The implication that an aging woman in a large home was confused, vulnerable. Grant continued. Their fastest path is to claim you're no longer capable. Guardianship. That would give them temporary control. I gripped the key in my pocket. And if they try that? Then we give them more than they bargained for. Grant pulled out a security system booklet. Jonah is installing upgraded cameras on the barn, front gate, and around the house. From now on, every movement is recorded. Every visit, every interaction. I nodded. Evidence. Exactly. We worked for hours. I signed documents that would stop any unauthorized access to my accounts. We filed alerts with the title company. Grant contacted the bank to flag suspicious inquiries. When we paused, he poured us both ice water and studied me carefully. "Grace, this isn't going to be easy," he said quietly. "They'll escalate. They'll get nasty. They'll try to make you doubt yourself." I looked around my home, the framed photographs, the beams Robert sanded with his bare hands, the citrus trees trying to bloom outside. Then I looked right back at Grant, every ounce of hesitation washed away. "I am done doubting." A knock sounded from the front porch. Not frantic, not polite, something in between. My pulse quickened, but Grant motioned for me to stay seated. He opened the door himself. Sheriff Nolan Graves stood beneath the porch roof, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, Grace," he greeted with a kind familiarity. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. Wanted to ask if you're all right." My stomach fluttered. How much had he heard? "I'm all right," I replied. "Just dealing with family business." His eyes flicked to the forms spread across the table behind me. "So I see." He stepped inside just enough for his voice to drop lower. "I've heard some talk around town that you're, well, struggling to manage things here on your own." There it was. The whisper turned knife. Grant crossed his arms. "Sheriff, you've seen her driving at sunrise every week to volunteer at the food center. Does that sound like someone unable to care for herself?" Sheriff Graves nodded. "That's why I'm here, to clear the air. I'll happily attest to your independence if it comes to that." Relief loosened the tension in my shoulders. "Thank you." His expression softened. "You've got plenty of folks on your side, Grace." He tipped his hat and stepped back into the rain. When the door closed again, Grant exhaled. "They're definitely preparing legal filings." I pressed my palm to the brass key, letting its ridges anchor me to the floor beneath my feet. "Then we stay ahead of them," I said, "every step of the way." Grant cracked a proud smile. "That's the spirit." The rain finally lightened, and the house breathed again. We stacked a thick folder of documents in the center of the table, a fortress built from ink and truth. I whispered more to myself than to Grant. I've spent years believing love meant giving whatever was asked. I forgot that love can mean saying no. Through the window, I saw the sea. The waves didn't fear the rocks they crashed into. They grew stronger against them. I stood, spine straightening, and locked the front door one more time. If they wanted a fight, I was done hiding my strength. By the end of the week, the air in town felt different. Conversations hushed when I walked past. Heads tilted in pity or curiosity. Rumors travel faster than ocean wind in a place like Santa Barbara. I woke before sunrise, as always. My steps echoed through the hallway while the house slept quietly around me. I grabbed my coat and slipped outside. The cold bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. Cold makes you alert. The steering wheel felt familiar in my grip as I drove into town. This was my routine. A routine anyone could witness. I reached the food center and helped carry boxes of produce inside. The volunteers smiled, asked how I was doing. I smiled back. Strong, capable, present. Not the woman someone wanted to paint me as. When I returned home, Jonah was already working on the front gate. installing a new camera with soldering tools spread around him like tiny metal birds. I watched him for a moment. His quiet skill was reassuring. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Morning," I returned. "Thank you for everything you're doing." He nodded once, then pointed to the house. "You've got someone waiting." A chill slid down my spine, not from the morning air. Madeline. She stood near the porch steps, perfectly dressed, hair immaculate, as though a single raindrop from the earlier storm would be beneath her dignity. A smile hovered on her lips, too smooth to be friendly. "Grace," she greeted lightly. "Can we talk?" I stepped closer, my boots crunching against gravel. "You didn't call first." Her eyes flicked toward the new camera blinking at the gate. "I see you've been busy." "I have," I replied. She clasped her hands together dramatically. "I'm worried about you." There it was, the script she wanted to direct. My silence pressed her to continue. "You've been confused, Grace, forgetful, stressed." Her voice softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. "And it's okay. That's what we're here for. I haven't asked for your help." "You don't have to ask," she chirped. "Family steps in when someone can't take care of themselves anymore." I ground my heel into the gravel, anchoring myself. "I'm fully capable." She tilted her head. "That's not what people are saying." "People?" I asked. "Or you?" Madeline shrugged delicately. "I can't control what others notice." Then her smile widened. "But I can protect you." I stared at her, at this woman who married my son and expected to inherit my entire life like a prize in a raffle. "You're not protecting me," I said. "You're preparing to replace me." Her smile didn't falter. "It's too much house for you on your own. Let us handle the burden." "It's not a burden," I said. "Everything becomes a burden eventually," she countered. "You mean once love is gone?" My words were soft. Her eyes flickered. Before she could respond, a voice called from the road. Chloe Harper, the pretty young realtor who often drank wine with Madeline during beach socials. She waved her phone triumphantly. "Got the listing draft ready," she announced. I turned slowly. "Listing?" Chloe approached, stuttering to a halt as she registered my presence. Her cheeks flushed. "Oh, I thought—" She swallowed. "Madeline said you'd already approved." Madeline cut her off with a sharp look. "Chloe, don't!" Chloe's eyes darted between us, realizing she'd revealed something she shouldn't have. "You're trying to sell my home," I said. Madeline didn't deny it. "We're exploring options." I felt the brass key in my pocket warm against my palm. Betrayal has a temperature, hot enough to scorch. Chloe muttered, "I'm sorry," then nearly tripped running back to her car. Madeline sighed in annoyance, watching her go. "She's unreliable." I took a slow breath, then another. Calm is a blade sharpened by silence. "You should leave," I said. Madeline stepped closer, voice low and poisoned sweet. "Lucas is filing a petition. Guardianship. Once a judge sees the evidence, everything you're doing here will finally make sense." "What evidence?" I asked. She leaned in until I could smell expensive perfume layered over impatience. "The evidence we're creating." That was when Jonah came up the path with a toolbox in his hand. He didn't speak. He just stood there, solid as a brick wall. Madeline retreated half a step, masking it with a cough. She put a hand over her heart. "I care about you, Grace. You can be angry now. You can resist. But the court will see through all this pretend strength soon enough." She turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. Gravel hissed under her shoes. Jonah and I watched her disappear where the road curved. He finally spoke. "She's dangerous." "No," I corrected softly. "She's desperate, and desperate people forget to hide their tracks." A text buzzed on my phone. I opened it. A blurry photo of me at the food center. A caption below, wandering alone again. Confused? Getting worse. My fingers shook around the screen. My heart pounded so hard my chest hurt. They were building a story, a false one that would take my independence and everything I loved if I didn't stop it now. I walked inside and sank into my chair. My breath wouldn't steady this time. Old fears clawed up. The fear of losing control, of being dismissed, of being emptied out of my own life. A soft knock came a few minutes later. Dr. Evelyn Cho stepped inside with a gentle smile. "Grace, may I come in?" Grant must have called her. I nodded and motioned to the couch. She sat, opened a small notebook, and spoke calmly. "I'm here to evaluate your cognitive health. I'm not on anyone's side except the truth." I laughed weakly. Truth is a rare commodity around here lately. She observed me a moment before replying. "That's why I'm here, so they can't twist your strength into something fragile." We spent nearly an hour talking. She asked about my routines, memories, dates, news headlines. I answered every question clearly. At the end, she wrote something quickly and closed her notebook with satisfying certainty. "You're sharp," she said. "Very sharp. I'll make sure the official documents say so." Relief poured through me like sunlight. Before she left, she offered just one more sentence. "Fight like someone who remembers who she is." When the door shut behind her, I pressed my forehead against the cool wood and closed my eyes. They wanted me confused. They wanted me scared. But now they'd have to face me as I truly was, awake alert and unbreakable. By the time the sun began slipping behind the hills, the house felt too quiet again. I made myself a small dinner but barely tasted it. Every creak of the wood floor sounded like an accusation. They wanted me to doubt myself, to flinch, to crumble. I refused. Still, after the dishes were washed and stacked, the silence stretched like a long shadow. I took the brass key from my pocket and set it in the center of the table. I traced its edges slowly. I remembered the weight of it when Robert first placed it in my palm. That memory steadied me more than food ever could. A soft knock tapped against the back door. I turned, heart fluttering. There stood Lucas, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, hair damp from evening mist. He looked smaller than he had that morning, like guilt had hollowed something inside him. I opened the door without a word and stepped aside. He entered quietly, eyes fixed on the floor, like he didn't deserve to look up. "Mom," he began, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't know everything she was planning." I picked up the key and held it lightly between us. "But you were planning something." He flinched. "I never wanted to hurt you." My throat tightened. "But you did." He sat at the table, elbows on knees, head bowed. The boy who used to run barefoot through this house had grown into a man afraid of standing still. "I'm in debt," he confessed. "A lot of debt. I made mistakes, some business deals, some loans I shouldn't have signed." He rubbed his face with his palms. "I kept thinking one good investment would fix everything. I kept thinking I could make you proud by succeeding on my own." I listened. Not as a mother trying to fix things, but as a woman who had finally drawn a boundary. "Madeline thinks money erases mistakes," he continued. "If we lived here," she thought it would prove something, that we weren't failures. I slid into the chair across from him. The brass key rested between us, gleaming faintly. "You are not a failure," I said quietly. "But you're letting someone else steer your life straight into a wall." He swallowed hard. "She's scared, Mom." "So am I admitted. But fear doesn't excuse cruelty. He nodded, tears catching the dim light. I just want to fix everything. Then stop trying to take what isn't yours, I replied. Start by owning what is. He reached for the key, but stopped halfway, fingers shaking. I remember when Dad gave this to you, he whispered. I thought it was magic, like whoever held it was the protector of this place. That's exactly what it is, I said. His hand fell back to his lap. Madeline showed me papers, guardianship papers. She said it was the only way to keep you safe. His voice trembled. She told me you weren't thinking clearly. I pressed a palm over my heart, breathing steady. And you believed her? I didn't know what to believe. A tear slid down his cheek. And I still don't. You believe what you see, I said. You saw me driving this morning, keeping my routines, handling my home. You saw me fight for myself. He nodded, wiping his face. She wants to protect her status more than she wants to protect you, I added gently. You deserve better than that. He sat back, letting those words settle in the space between us. We stayed quiet until the kettle whistled. I stood, poured 2 cups of tea, and returned with one for him. He held the mug like it was fragile. I don't know how to get out, he whispered. Of the debt, of the pressure, of her plans. Start with honesty, I said. Every lie you agree to becomes another chain. He looked at me, as though seeing truth for the first time in years. I'm scared she'll leave me if I stop going along with everything. I leaned closer, voice low and firm. If love disappears the moment you say no, it was never love. He exhaled shakily. I reached across the table and rested my fingers atop his. A small gesture, but one that felt like a bridge. You can still choose a different road, I said. You can come back from this. He nodded, lips pressed together. I want to. I just don't know how. You don't have to know everything tonight, I said. Just take one step away from the wrong path. He stared at the key again. Madeline's filing those papers tomorrow. She said Judge Harmon will grant them fast because they're urgent. Anger flashed hot in my chest, but I kept my expression calm. Thank you for warning me. He stood slowly, anxiety rippling through him. I should go before she realizes I'm gone. Lucas, I called as he reached the door. He turned, eyes red. I love you, I said. Not for what you have or don't have. I love you because you're my son. His voice cracked. I love you too. He stepped onto the porch, shoulders hunched beneath the growing night. The stars were faint, scattered like distant promises that might still hold. Before he left, he looked back once more. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a surrender. It was a hope. When the door closed, I pressed my palm against the wood and let a single tear slip free. Just one. Then I wiped it away. Because tomorrow, I would face something far bigger than hurt feelings or pride. They weren't just coming for my house anymore. They were coming for my freedom. The courthouse always smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors. A strange kind of cleanliness, the kind that tries to hide the mess people drag in. Grant walked beside me, briefcase held like a shield, his jaw locked tight with purpose. Remember, he said quietly. Say only what needs to be said. You don't defend innocence. You demonstrate it. I nodded, though anxiety buzzed beneath my ribs like a trapped bee. The brass key lay in my pocket, pressing into my thigh with every step, a reminder of everything at stake. We found our seats. The courtroom was already filling with spectators. In a small town, public humiliation was a kind of entertainment. But I held my head high. I wasn't here to perform. The door to the hall swung open. Madeline entered first, her heels striking the floor like a countdown. Lucas followed behind her, shoulders slumped, eyes avoiding mine. A lawyer I didn't recognize, a tall man with polished hair and a snake smile, carried a stack of folders toward the bench. Carlton, Madeline's new advocate. He glanced over at me, eyes glinting. He liked the scent of blood. Judge Harmon, a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and glasses that seemed to see through excuses, took her seat. Everyone rose, then settled. The wooden benches creaked with restless anticipation. Carlton stood immediately. Your Honor, thank you for hearing this urgent matter. We are here today to protect Mrs. Grace Whitford. Grant shot up before he could continue. To be clear, Your Honor, they are here to take control of my client's life and estate. The judge raised a hand, silencing both of them. Let's proceed one at a time. Carlton clasped his hands as if offering prayer. Lucas Whitford is the sole heir. He and his wife are gravely concerned about Mrs. Whitford's cognitive decline and recent erratic decisions. They are requesting temporary guardianship to ensure her safety and the preservation of assets. My chest tightened. He made it sound like I was wandering into traffic. And what evidence do you have of this alleged decline? Judge Harmon asked. Carlton nodded to the bailiff, who wheeled forward a cart stacked with binders and glossy photo printouts. Carlton lifted the first set. Evidence A. Reports of confusion at local events. Witnesses observed Mrs. Whitford struggling to recall dates and wandering alone at inappropriate hours. He held up a blurry photo. Me outside the food center. Alone. The angle made me look lost. Murmurs rippled through the room. Grant rose. Your Honor, if they've been following her, surely that says more about them than it does about her memory. Judge Harmon tapped a pen against her notepad. We'll reserve commentary. Continue. Evidence B. Carlton moved on. Financial irresponsibility. She has been giving away large sums of money without documentation or oversight. I stiffened. That was generosity twisted into negligence. Carlton continued. And evidence C. Testimony from a medical aide, Barton Klein, who claims she sometimes forgets medication and repeats conversations. A thin man in a wrinkled suit entered the room and took a seat at the witness stand. Barton. He'd worked here briefly, helping with yard cleanups. He looked anxious, but determined. Grant leaned toward me and whispered, He's lying for a paycheck. My stomach twisted. Judge Harmon nodded. Mr. Klein, proceed. Barton cleared his throat. She called me by the wrong name, twice, and once she thought I was her late husband. A gasp from the gallery. My fingers curled tight around the key. I refused to let tears show. Grant stood, his voice steady but sharp. Mr. Klein, how long did you work on Mrs. Whitford's property? 3 weeks, he muttered. And during those 3 weeks, did she ever forget your payment? Your schedule? Your tasks? Barton hesitated. Well, no. Grant stepped closer. Did she ever mistake you for her husband when he was alive? Barton blinked, confused. No, I mean, he was already... So she erred once while grieving? Grant turned to the judge. Your Honor, grief is not incompetence. Judge Harmon made a brief note. Carlton stepped forward again. Your Honor, this is a woman living alone in a massive property, isolated and vulnerable. His voice softened like butter melting. We just want to protect her. I rose before Grant could hold me back. My voice was steady, though I felt the tremor of 1,000 years beneath it. Your Honor, I run this estate every day. I manage maintenance. I volunteer weekly. I drive myself everywhere I go. I pay every bill, and I have staff who can testify to my capability. Madeline shot to her feet. She's manipulating everyone. She's not well. Judge Harmon's gaze sliced toward her. Mrs. Pierce Whitford, sit. Madeline sat, lips curled back in frustration. Grant motioned to the evidence folder we didn't yet have permission to use. A folder full of documents Dr. Cho was finalizing. But they weren't complete, and without them, our case felt exposed. Judge Harmon looked at both lawyers, then at me. This court takes elder well-being very seriously. To ensure fairness until a full evaluation can be made. She paused. The room froze around her next words. The estate's decision-making authority will be temporarily limited. Mrs. Whitford will need court approval for any major financial or property-related transactions. A collective exhale from Madeline's side. Triumph glimmered in her eyes. A heavy weight pressed against my ribs. It felt like losing oxygen, like a rug being pulled from under memory. Grant stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is premature. Temporary, the judge repeated firmly, and necessary until we review professional evaluations. Temporary or not, it stung like a betrayal branded into skin. A final gavel strike. Adjourned. Madeline gathered her purse smugly. Carlton whispered something into her ear that made her smile a perfect, cruel line. Lucas stared at the floor, shame radiating off him like heat. Grant placed a steadying hand on my arm. We will appeal, and we will win. But we need more proof, more evidence. I nodded, though tears threatened to slip loose. We stepped outside into the late afternoon haze. The ocean breeze met me like a familiar friend, brushing against my cheeks, reminding me to stand tall. The courthouse doors shut behind us with a heavy thud. I inhaled deeply, letting salt air replace stale courtroom fear. Temporary limits, temporary doubt, temporary defeat. But the truth? The truth would outlast every lie spoken in that room. I pressed the key against my heart through my coat. Warmth spread beneath my palm. I wasn't done. I wasn't gone. They thought they'd won the day. They forgot that the night was mine. Night fell heavier than usual. The house, once a fortress of comfort, stood like a witness to everything I had just lost. Temporary or not, the court's decision scraped raw across my pride. I moved quietly from room to room, turning off lights, listening to each creak as though the house itself was trying to speak comfort and failing. In the dining room, I paused. 2 empty chairs across from me waited like accusations. I pulled one out and sat, the wood cool against my spine. I folded my hands and stared at the key lying in the middle of the table. My fingertips hovered over it, afraid of what it represented now. Loss? Or power waiting to rise again? My hand closed around it anyway. A soft pain pressed into my palm from the ridged edges, but I didn't let go. That key had lived in Robert's pocket first. It had warmed beneath his touch, been turned by his hands, used to protect what he loved. It was never just a key. It was continuity. It was purpose. It was a vow. I squeezed it harder until the metal bit deep enough to leave marks. The phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. This is just the beginning. Sign over power, and no one gets hurt. My heart lurched. For a moment, fear curled its cold hand around my spine. But just as quickly, something else replaced it. Anger. The kind that didn't shout or flare, but burned slow and steady, like a lantern lit deep inside my chest. Whoever sent that message underestimated me badly. I stood and paced, letting the rhythm of my footsteps push away the panic. One step, another, then another. The floorboards knew I wouldn't break. A knock shattered the silence, firm but considerate. 2 taps, a pause, then 2 more. I took a breath and opened the door. Grant stood there, hair damp from the mist, eyes solemn but sharp. He held a thick folder under one arm. I thought you might need this sooner rather than later, he said. I stepped aside and he entered without waiting for an invitation. permission granted by years of trust. He placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. The first page bore Robert's signature at the bottom, bold and confident even after life had started to slip away from him. "This," Grant said, tapping the page, "is the original trust document. The one Robert set up before his cancer treatment. It clarifies the terms the court didn't consider today." I traced my finger along my husband's name. The ink might have dried decades ago, but love doesn't fade so easily. Grant continued, "It establishes independent trustees, and they aren't named Lucas or Madeline." He paused, letting me absorb that. "They have no legal right to force access. Not yet, and maybe not ever." I swallowed hard. A tear threatened at the corner of my eye, but I blinked it away before it could fall. He pointed to another section. "The responsibilities include demonstrating stewardship of the land, which you are already doing. Jonah's work logs, your volunteer records, receipts, and bank statements, all of it proves capability, not incompetence." My breath rushed out, shaky relief threading through it. "Additionally," Grant added, "there's a clause that prevents the estate from being listed or sold without trustee approval." He raised a brow, "which means whatever Madeline is planning with that realtor is not just presumptuous, it's a violation." A small spark of satisfaction flared inside me. They'd walked into their own trap. Grant sat back, folding his hands. "I know today hurt, but you must understand, the court didn't rule that you were incapable. They ruled they need more information. We will give them more than they asked for." He studied me a moment longer. "Is there anything Madeline could use against you? Anything at all that could appear questionable?" I thought back to the grocery store line where I forgot the day of the week, the moment during Barton's shift when grief clouded my eyes and I called him Robert. But grief is not madness. Memory is not weakness. "No," I said. "There is nothing that changes who I am." Grant nodded. "Good. Then we're fine." He began to pack up his papers, but I reached out and touched his wrist lightly. "Stay a moment," I said. "Please." We sat in silence for a bit. The ticking of the old kitchen clock sounded like a heartbeat. "I don't want to lose him," I whispered. "Not the house. Not Lucas." Grant sighed. "Losing neither is the goal, but you can't let him sink you alongside his fear." I stared at the key again. The indentation it had left on my palm still throbbed gently. Grant glanced toward the hallway. "Do you have the original copy of Robert's letter, the one he wrote after the trust was finalized?" My pulse quickened. That letter had been tucked away in the bedside drawer since the day he died. I stood and walked down the corridor. My fingers found the familiar handle of the drawer, smooth from decades of opening and closing. The letter was there, sealed in its wrinkled envelope. I brought it back to Grant and placed it on the table. He didn't open it. He simply rested his palm on it. "This," he said, "is testimony too. Love that doesn't fade reveals truth that doesn't falter." His words soothed the last shreds of panic trying to cling to my chest. A faint roll of thunder echoed in the distance. The weather had shifted again, as if the sky was trying to match the turmoil below. Grant stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "We're going to win, Grace," he said. "Not because we shout louder, but because we have the truth." I nodded. "And I have the key." He gave me one final nod before disappearing into the night. I locked the door behind him and rested my forehead against the wood, breathing deep. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence wasn't frightening. It was resolute. I walked back to the table, picked up the brass key, and slipped it into my pocket. My fingers lingered over it with a steadiness I didn't feel yesterday. Tomorrow would come, and I would meet it standing tall. They wanted to close doors around me, but I still had every key I needed. Morning sunlight sliced through the curtains like clean edges of truth. I woke before the alarm, my body already bracing for the weight of the day. Today wasn't about defense. It was about revelation, about showing the world that I was not a woman fading into confusion, but one stepping fully into her power. The courthouse loomed ahead as Grant and I walked up the steps. My pulse was steady. The brass key in my pocket thumped lightly against my hip with every stride, as though encouraging me forward. Grant held the door for me. "Let's give them the facts. They won't know what to do with honesty this sharp." I smiled gently at his attempt at humor, but my eyes were focused. This wasn't a battle of emotion. It was a battle of proof. Inside, Lucas sat alone at the petitioner's table, his shoulders curved inward, guilt sitting heavy upon him. Madeline wasn't there yet. The absence of her perfume and sharpened smile made the air easier to breathe. But I knew better than to mistake a delay for surrender. She arrived 3 minutes before it began, striding in with a folder clutched against her chest, like it was a trophy she planned to collect. Carlton trailed behind her, whispering strategy into her ear. Judge Harmon entered. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. Grant stood first. "Your Honor, since our last appearance, we have gathered critical information demonstrating Mrs. Whitford's full capacity to manage her estate." His tone was crisp, unshakable. Judge Harmon gestured for him to proceed. Grant motioned to the first witness. "Sheriff Nolan Graves." The sheriff stepped forward, hat respectfully removed, his uniform lending quiet authority. He testified that he'd seen me driving independently on multiple occasions at dawn, volunteering, maintaining routine, and making logical decisions without assistance. "She's as capable as any of us," he concluded. Carlton objected half-heartedly, but the judge took note. Next, Jonah was called. He approached nervously, wiping his palms against his work pants. But when he spoke, it was with clarity. "I've worked for Mrs. Whitford for years," he said. "She runs this place, keeps schedules better than anyone I've known, orders feed, handles payroll, signs every check. Nothing gets past her." He described how I documented every task and insisted on precision. He told them about mornings when I walked the property line before sunrise, checking gates, tools, irrigation. Carlton tried to twist it. "Perhaps she's paranoid, over-controlling." Jonah stared him down. "No, sir. She's responsible." His final word echoed like a struck bell. Judge Harmon made another note. Grant smiled subtly. "Now, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Dr. Evelyn Cho." Dr. Cho walked up in a soft blue suit, her presence calm but powerful. She looked directly at the judge. "I completed a full cognitive assessment of Mrs. Whitford 48 hours ago. Her results indicate high executive function, clear memory recall, emotional regulation, and full comprehension of her affairs." Madeline shifted in her seat, discomfort tightening her features. Dr. Cho added, "What I see is not decline. What I see is resilience." My chest warmed at the word. Carlton stepped forward with visible annoyance. "Doctor, could Mrs. Whitford simply be masking symptoms?" Dr. Cho's answer was immediate. "No, decline cannot pretend to be stability this long. Mrs. Whitford isn't performing, she's living." Grant leaned in to whisper, "We're not done." He slid a USB drive onto the evidence table. "Your Honor, I request permission to show a short video compilation." Approval granted. The screen flickered to life. Clips from the newly installed security cameras appeared. Me unlocking gates, logging inventory in the barn, watering the orchard, checking roof shingles after the storm. I watched myself move gracefully, knowingly, purposefully. There was no confusion there. Each clip was time-stamped. Each clip was truth. Madeline's grip on her folder tightened until the cardboard bent. Grant let the images speak for themselves before continuing. Mrs. Whitford is the steward of her land. Always has been. He placed a final stack of papers on the table. Furthermore, Robert Whitford established a living trust that remains active. It appoints independent trustees and confirms that any change of control must be unanimously approved while Mrs. Whitford is capable. He slid a finger under a page. The petitioner signed a document under false pretenses. He lifted the page and faced Lucas with it. "Do you remember signing this?" Lucas looked frozen, breath caught mid-throat. Madeline hissed, "Don't answer." But Judge Harmon cut her off. "Let him speak," Lucas swallowed. I didn't read it. She said it was for our joint account. I didn't know it was about guardianship." Grant's voice softened. That admission alone proves undue influence. Lucas's shame-filled eyes drifted to me, then down again. Grant finished firmly. "Your Honor, all their claims fall apart under the weight of facts. Mrs. Whitford is capable, responsible, and under attack by people fueled more by fear and greed than concern. We request full restoration of her authority." Judge Harmon sat silent for a long moment. Then she lifted her gaze, piercing and measured. "Mrs. Whitford," she addressed me directly, "do you have anything you wish to say?" I rose slowly. My husband believed we could build something that would last beyond us, not something to be sold or argued over, but cared for. I touched the pocket where the key pressed against my heart. I know who I am. I know what I'm doing, and I know this land like a mother knows her child. I'm not confused. I'm not lost. I'm simply refusing to be erased. Silence washed through the room, dense and reverent. Judge Harmon closed her folder. Petition denied, full rights restored. Madeline gasped as though someone had knocked the wind from her lungs. Carlton dropped his pen. Lucas bowed his head, tears threatening again. Grant sat slowly back into the chair, relief smoothing his shoulders. Judge Harmon added, eyes settling directly on Madeline, "I strongly advise you to reconsider the path you're on." Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Whitford, you've earned the court's respect today." The gavel struck. Court dismissed. People began to file out. Some offered smiles. Others whispered my name with something like admiration. As Grant packed away the papers, I walked toward Lucas. He didn't look up until I spoke. "You told the truth," I said. "That matters." His voice trembled. "I'm so sorry." His regret was real, but healing would not be instant. Behind him, Madeline glared, not at Lucas, not at the judge, at me, as though my strength was the greatest insult she'd ever suffered. I slipped the brass key back into my pocket where it belonged. Today, a door slammed shut on their lies. Tomorrow, I would open one toward justice they never expected. I asked Lucas to come home with me, not to celebrate. There was nothing celebratory about watching your child wrestle with his own broken compass, but because I needed to look him in the eyes, away from lawyers and spectators and his wife's shadow. We drove in separate cars, the sun sinking low behind us as the estate came into view. The house, lit by the early evening glow, seemed taller than usual, like it was standing on my behalf. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar air wrapped around me, warm with memory. Lucas followed, quietly closing the door behind him. His gaze wandered across the living room as though he was seeing it for the first time, seeing what he nearly lost. I motioned for him to sit at the dining table. He did, shoulders hunched, eyes glassy. I placed a glass of water in front of him. His hand shook as he reached for it. He didn't drink. "I didn't know she was doing all of that," he murmured. "But you knew she was doing something, I replied. He looked up, guilt written into every line on his face. I thought she just wanted stability. I thought she wanted me to be better. Better than what? I asked softly. His voice shrank into something small. Better than who I really am. I sank into the chair across from him. The two empty seats from this morning were now filled, one with shame, the other with a chance at honesty. Lucas, I said, you don't need wealth to be worthy. He stared at me, bewildered. Then why does it feel like everyone else believes you do? Because they were taught by the wrong people, because society worships shiny surfaces and calls them virtues, because Madeline turned insecurity into ambition, and ambition into entitlement. You can change what you believe, I told him. You can still choose what kind of man you'll be. He shook his head, overwhelmed. I messed up, Mom. I messed up bad. I reached across the table and laid my hand over his. He didn't pull away. Do you want the estate? I asked plainly. His breath hitched. I want you. I want our family. I want to stop being afraid all the time. He finally cried, really cried, shoulders shaking, hands over his face. I stood and walked around the table, placing a hand on his back like I used to when he had nightmares. After a moment, he pulled himself together, wiping his sleeve across damp cheeks. What happens now? He asked. You go home, I said. Not here. Home. And you think about the life you want, not the life she tells you deserve. He nodded. Then he hesitated. And Madeline? The air thickened. She won't stop, he whispered. She'll be furious after today. She'll escalate. I nodded slowly. Then she will show the world exactly who she is. He swallowed, trying to summon courage. Will you let me help you? A sad smile tugged at my lips. When you're ready to help for the right reasons, I'll welcome it. He understood. He stood, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he turned and spoke with more clarity than I'd heard from him in years. I don't want the house, he said. I want to be worthy of the people who built it. His words settled into the air like truth finally exhaled. After the door closed behind him, I stood still for a long moment, letting silence finish speaking. Then I sat back down at the table, hands around the empty mug he left behind. I had won the day in court, but the war wasn't over. Madeline would come back. Not humbled, wounded, and wounded pride is dangerous. I walked to the porch and sat in the rocking chair Robert built years ago. The sea wind was gentler tonight, brushing against my cheeks like a reminder of strength. The gate creaked, metal bending under a practiced hand. Madeline. She froze when she saw me watching. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No, Lucas? She asked, pretending to look around. He's thinking, I replied. Something you might want to try. Her jaw tightened. You may have won today, but don't get comfortable. She stepped forward. I've spent my whole life making sure I never end up like my mother. Poor, invisible, dependent. I won't let you ruin that for me. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. If your security comes from taking what isn't yours, then you've already lost. She scoffed. You think a single courtroom ruling changes anything? It changes everything, I said. It tells the truth. Her eyes darkened. You won't block me forever. I won't have to, I replied. You're doing that yourself. Madeline stepped closer, voice a hiss. If he chooses you, he leaves with nothing. If he stays with me, he gets everything. I stood slowly. Then he'll learn that choosing love over greed is the only way to keep anything that matters. Her fury trembled visibly now. You arrogant! I held up one hand, calm and firm. Don't mistake dignity for arrogance. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm simply protecting what was never yours." For a long moment, she said nothing. I could hear her breathing, sharp, uneven. She took one step back, then another. "This is not over," she repeated, and left through the gate without looking back. When the gate clicked shut, I let myself exhale. Back inside, I returned to the table and placed the brass key in its usual space. Its shine softened in the lamplight. I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm not afraid." Because tonight, my son walked out with a piece of his soul returning. I wasn't losing him. I was getting him back. The town meeting hall buzzed with the ordinary energy of neighbors arguing about parking permits and beach cleanup schedules. I sat in the back row, hands folded, watching the familiar dance of community decisions. Beatrice waved from across the aisle, her smile a quiet reassurance that I wasn't alone. I hadn't planned to speak tonight. I came to listen, to breathe in a room where my name wasn't being dissected like a problem. But fate has a habit of clearing its throat when you least expect it. The door swung open and conversation stuttered to a pause. Madeline strutted in wearing a crisp white suit, too bright for a casual town meeting, perfectly tailored for a performance. Chloe trailed behind her, more nervous, clutching a thumbnail drive in her fist. Lucas followed last, gaze glued to the floor. Madeline took a seat near the front, crossing her legs like she owned the building. Her eyes met mine with a gleam. Challenge accepted. The mayor approached the microphone. "Before we continue, Chloe Harper has requested 2 minutes regarding a real estate matter." "Chloe?" Chloe nearly dropped the drive but caught it mid-fumble. Her eyes met mine for just an instant. There was something desperate in them, and something brave. She plugged the drive into the projector and cleared her throat. "This isn't a listing presentation as you might expect. It's evidence." Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. Madeline's back stiffened. Chloe clicked play. Emails flashed onto the screen. Subject lines bold and damning. "Plan to market Whitford estate quietly. Grace will sign eventually. She's slipping. Need family narrative stronger before judge reviews. Lucas must push her. Pressure works." Each line punched the air from Madeline's lungs. Carlton's name appeared on several threads. Even her parents chimed in. Suggestions on renovations, guest house teardowns, resale strategies. Not once did anyone mention Lucas's happiness. Not once did they mention my well-being. Only numbers. Only upgrades. Only profit. Whispers erupted around the hall. Beatrice stepped closer, crossing her arms with fierce satisfaction. "That's what entitlement looks like," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Chloe continued, hands trembling but determined. "There are also audio recordings from meetings where they discussed guardianship as a tactic, not a necessity." Click. A voice filled the room, Madeline's. "She's stubborn but old. Push dementia, make her look fragile. Judge will hand it over." Gasps again. Someone muttered, "Disgusting." Madeline leapt to her feet. "This is illegal." Chloe turned slightly, shoulders squared. "Blackmail is illegal. Forging narrative to steal an estate is illegal. This," she pointed at the screen, "this is truth." Madeline lunged toward the laptop, but Lucas grabbed her arm. Not gently this time. His voice cracked, loud and raw enough to stop her cold. "Enough!" Every head turned. He stepped forward, voice shaking but loud enough to echo. "I'm done hurting my mother to fix my mistakes. I'm done lying for you." His chest heaved. "I'm done choosing fear." Madeline stared at him like he had betrayed God. Lucas turned to me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have stopped this sooner." I nodded once. Forgiveness wasn't a word yet, but acknowledgement was a beginning. Madeline's expression twisted, rage leaking through the cracks of her carefully applied grace. "You think this changes anything?" she seethed. "You think they'll admire you now? You're nothing without me." Lucas stood taller. "Then I'd rather be nothing with my dignity than everything with your shame." For the first time since I'd known her, Madeline looked genuinely afraid, because control was sliding through her fingers like sand. The mayor stepped in. "Ms. Pierce Whitford, you need to leave." She whirled toward the room, a room that once applauded her confidence. Now every pair of eyes judged her, saw her, defined her. The queen had lost her crown. Chloe disconnected the drive and stepped back, clutching her bag to her chest. Beatrice leaned toward me and whispered, "Public masks fall harder than private lies." Madeline's heels clacked toward the exit like a frantic metronome. She paused at the door only once, staring at me with a hatred so deep it nearly trembled. Then she stormed out into the night. The room exhaled as if released from a spell. Lucas sank into the nearest chair, exhausted. Chloe looked like she might collapse. I stood slowly and walked toward her. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. She swallowed. "I had to." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't be part of hurting you anymore." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then thank you. Truly." She nodded, tears brimming. "I hope one day someone fights for me like that." "You just fought for yourself," I answered. "That's where all real defense begins." The mayor returned to the microphone, but halted when Jonah stepped into the room, still wearing his work gloves. He must have heard what happened. News runs fast here. He stood behind me like a silent oath. "You are protected." As the meeting resumed its ordinary agenda, I stepped outside. The cool night air washed over me. The stars were brighter than they'd been in weeks. Lucas joined me on the steps. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. We both understood the ground had shifted. Tonight, truth had found a microphone, and lies had been escorted to the parking lot. The morning after the town meeting smelled of sea salt and jasmine, a combination that always reminded me that Santa Barbara could cleanse anything, even the residue of betrayal. I stood in the garden beside the old lemon tree Robert and I planted on our first anniversary. Dew clung to the leaves like tiny reminders that life renews itself every dawn. A car door slammed near the gate. I didn't flinch. I slipped the brass key into my pocket and walked toward the porch, steady as the tide. Madeline stood on the other side of the gate, gripping the bars with white knuckles. Her hair was pulled back perfectly, but something wild flickered in her eyes. Grant arrived moments later, stepping out of his sedan with a folder under his arm, unsurprised by her presence. She didn't wait for an invitation. Her voice rose like a blade. "Give me the keys." I didn't move. "To what?" "To the estate," she snapped. "To what's owed. To what's rightfully ours." I stepped forward. "It was never yours." She laughed bitterly. "You think one embarrassing night changes anything? You think you've won?" Grant placed a calming hand on my shoulder before addressing her. "The facts speak for themselves, especially the financial ones you can't explain." Madeline ignored him. Her eyes bore into mine. "Lucas is weak. He'll come crawling back. And when he does, everything will be different." "Different," I repeated softly. "You're right about that." Grant nodded to me. The timing was perfect. "Actually," I said, reaching into my coat, "there's something you should see." I pulled out a single document, freshly notarized just yesterday. The paper felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of an entire future. "This estate," I said, "is no longer called the Whitford estate." I handed the document to her through the gate. "It belongs to the Whitford Learning Reserve." Madeline stared at the page, her brows knitting together as she read. Confusion morphed into disbelief, and finally into pure shock. "What is this?" she demanded. "Land trust," Grant answered, voice composed. "With a permanent conservation easement, the property is now protected land for educational access and ecological preservation." Her eyes widened. "That means no private sale is allowed, ever," I finished. "No redevelopment, no personal profit. This land is here to serve the community, students, researchers, children who have never seen the ocean." Madeline shook her head violently. "You can't do that." "I just did." She crumpled the paper in her fist. "You gave away millions of dollars for strangers." "Not strangers," I corrected. "The next generation." Her jaw clenched. "You're insane." Grant took a step forward, voice cool as steel. "The trust is legally airtight. Independent trustees have full authority. Lucas is not one of them. Neither are you." Madeline's breath came in sharp bursts. "You've destroyed everything we worked for." "No," I said quietly. "I saved what Robert and I built." Her face contorted. "You think this is noble? You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I replied, "but it means I don't have to fear you anymore." She slammed her palm against the gate. "Give it back." "I can't," I said, "and I wouldn't if I could." Madeline shook with rage, gripping the bars so tightly I worried they'd bend. Grant spoke again, calmly. "I've also filed a protective order preventing further harassment or unauthorized entry onto this property. You will receive the documents by mail." "You're banishing us?" she hissed. "No," I replied. "You banished yourself when you forgot how to love." Her expression turned from fury to desperation. "Lucas will never forgive you for this." "He forgives me already," I said softly. "And soon, he'll forgive himself." Madeline's breath trembled. "You think he'll come back to you? You think he'll choose you over me?" I didn't raise my voice. Quiet truth cuts deepest. "He will choose the life he doesn't have to be ashamed of." She stumbled backward as if I'd struck her. The wind picked up, rustling the lemon tree leaves overhead. A single yellow fruit dropped, rolling gently to my feet. Madeline's voice broke into a rasp. "I will make sure you regret this." "You already tried," I said, "and I survived." She backed away step by step, shoes unsteady on the gravel. Rage simmered beneath her skin, but it had nothing left to fuel itself with. Just before reaching her car, she turned, fire shaking her words. "You're old, Grace. Time will take everything from you eventually." I walked to the gate, resting my fingers lightly on the cool metal. "If time takes me," I answered, "it will find me standing." Madeline faltered. She had no reply. She climbed into her car and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. Gravel scattered in her wake, but she didn't look back. The gate rattled lightly in the breeze. The property behind me felt bigger, softer, sacred. Grant stood beside me, adjusting his glasses with relief settling deep in his shoulders. "You did the right thing." I watched the horizon glow gold as the last light of day sank into the sea. "I did the only thing that made sense," I said. "Legacy isn't measured in dollars." Grant offered a gentle bow of his head. "Robert would be proud." A wave of emotion rose and settled before it could spill into tears. I placed the brass key into the pocket of my cardigan. Its shape pressed into my hip like a signature. Footsteps sounded behind us, Jonah carrying a stack of letters from the mailbox. He handed me one, smiling faintly. "This came in earlier. Thought you'd want it right away." The envelope bore the seal of the newly formed trust. I traced it with my thumb. Smooth, official, real. I looked past them both, through the gate, out toward town, and the winding road that led beyond it. A new chapter waited there, one defined not by fear of losing something, but by the joy of giving it purpose. Grant gathered his things. We should celebrate. We already did, I said. How? He asked. I smiled as the breeze brushed my hair back. By doing what's right. The sky deepened into twilight, stars beginning to spark into existence. I took one more deep breath of salt air and turned toward the house. This land didn't belong to me anymore, but my dignity always would. The cottage by the sea was smaller than the estate, but somehow felt bigger inside my chest. Every corner breathed comfort instead of fear. Every window framed a horizon that asked nothing of me except to keep looking forward. I unpacked slowly, letting the quiet become my new companion. A single rocking chair beside a small fireplace, shelves filled with photographs and books I'd chosen to keep. And on a little wooden table near the window, a ceramic teapot Robert bought in Carmel on our last road trip together. The place smelled faintly of lavender and ocean salt. It smelled like a fresh start. A seagull cried as it swooped down near the fence outside. The ocean breeze carried the sound through the partially open window, along with a hint of citrus from the lemon groves below. I breathed in deeply, letting that air settle somewhere deep, where old wounds lived. On the kitchen counter waited a sealed envelope with the Whitford Learning Reserve emblem. I hadn't opened it yet. I traced the embossed seal with my finger, feeling a strange mixture of nerves and pride. That land, that house, the stables and orchards and shoreline, it was all protected now. Not as a trophy, not as leverage, not as inheritance, but as legacy. The sound of footsteps approached, soft, uncertain. A shadow passed the window. Then a gentle knock. I didn't rush. I set the envelope down carefully and walked to the door. When I opened it, Lucas stood there. Wind-tousled hair, hands shoved into pockets, shoulders not hunched anymore but not fully upright either. A man caught mid-rebirth. He looked nervous, like a boy waiting outside the principal's office. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi," I replied. Those two letters felt like the beginning of something. He held a small paper bag. "I brought empanadas from the cafe you like." I stepped aside and let him in. He took in the cottage like he didn't quite believe I had already made a home here. "You really moved," he said quietly. "I did." He nodded, swallowing the realization. "It's peaceful. You deserve peaceful." We sat at the little table facing the sea, empanadas steaming between us. He pushed one toward me, his hand shaking just slightly. "I owe you a lot of apologies," he said. "You don't owe me anything," I replied. His eyes lifted to mine, glassy. "I owe you everything. You protected me even when I didn't protect. You defended me even while I helped someone else attack you." I rested my palms against the warm cup of tea in front of me. Hurt people, Lucas. Fear can turn anyone into a stranger." I allowed the silence to hold the rest of what I didn't say. He had been afraid of becoming worthless, so he tried to cling to worth he hadn't earned. He stared at his hands, twisting the corner of a napkin. "I left her," he said finally. "Last night. Packed a bag and went to a motel. I told her I needed time." His voice softened. Time to remember who I was before fear took over. I let that sink in. Humility often arrives on trembling legs. "That's a good step," I said. "It's just a step." He wiped his eyes with the heel of his palm. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever." My heart cracked a little at the edges, but not from anger, from relief. Honesty is the sound of a soul finding its way back home. "Forgiveness isn't a switch," I told him. "It's a door. You earn the key over time." He nodded. "I want to earn it." We both glanced toward the ocean. The sun hovered low, painting the water gold and red. The light bounced across Lucas's face, catching the shimmer of tears he didn't bother wiping away anymore. "Can I ask one thing?" he said. "Of course." He cleared his throat. "Can I come by sometimes? To talk? To learn how to be the kind of son you can be proud of?" I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, cushioned by soft cloth, lay the brass key. The grooves shone from years of turning. I ran my thumb along it once before closing the lid and placing the box back. "The door to my heart has always been open," I said, "but you must walk in without someone else holding your hand." A single tear rolled down his cheek, but he smiled. Not a perfect smile, a real one. "I'll try," he whispered. "That's all you need to promise." He stood and walked to the window, studying the horizon like he was trying to memorize hope. "This view," he breathed. "It makes you believe in better days." "It does," I said, stepping to join him, "and better choices." We stood there a moment longer, watching a sailboat drift slowly past the edge of the world. Lucas finally turned back toward me. "I won't stay long today," he said. "I just wanted to see you, to say thank you, and to ask for another chance." "You have it," I said, "one day at a time." He nodded, then moved toward the door. Before leaving, he hesitated, hand resting lightly on the knob. "Mom?" he said without turning. "Yes?" "Thank you for not shutting the door on me." His voice softened to a bare whisper. "Not everyone gets a second chance." I walked closer, but not too close. Healing needs space. "This door is always open for my son," I said, "but not for his hunger." He looked, back at me then, really looked. A mix of gratitude, sorrow, and determination lived in his eyes. He opened the door and stepped out into the waning light. The screen door clicked shut gently behind him. I let the silence breathe a moment before returning to the table. I opened the envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing of the estate, signed by a little girl who had come on a school field trip the week before. Beneath the scribbled trees and cottage were 4 words in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for sharing." I pressed the paper to my chest. Warmth spread beneath my palm, filling the spaces fear once claimed. The ocean roared softly against the cliffs, a reminder that nothing strong stays silent forever. I returned the brass key to its wooden box, placing it beside my teacup. The cottage lights glowed as day slipped into night. Stewardship never ends, but ownership changes shape. I wasn't living in fear anymore. I was living forward.